"You're just not ambitious enough for my future, Sarah." The words flickered on my phone screen, chilling me deeper than the January air seeping through my apartment window. My breath hitched, a sharp, painful gasp that felt like a physical blow. Mark, my Mark, the man I'd spent 2 years building a future with, had just ended us. Not with a conversation, not even a call, but with a cold, unfeeling text. My hand trembled, the phone almost slipping from my grasp as his words burrowed into my chest like venom. Not ambitious enough. The phrase echoed, mocking me. I stared at the glowing rectangle, my vision blurring. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a character assassination, a dismissal of my entire being. If you've ever felt utterly dismissed, like your worth was being measured and found wanting by someone you loved, hit that like button and subscribe. Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step to finding your strength. My strength felt shattered. I reread the message, again and again, as if the repetition would change the cruel finality of it. It didn't. The apartment, usually a haven of shared laughter and quiet comfort, now felt like a tomb. I saw his favorite mug on the counter, the blanket we shared draped over the sofa, each item a silent, agonizing testament to a love that had apparently been a mirage. How could he? How could someone who professed to love me, who knew my dreams, however small or grand, reduce me to a single, damning judgment? For hours, I sat there, numb, the cold seeping into my bones. Tears eventually came, hot and relentless, blurring the screen until Mark's brutal words became an illegible smear. I cried until my eyes burned and my throat ached. I cried for the relationship, for the future I'd envisioned, for the naive girl who believed in a shared path. But mostly, I cried for the accusation, not ambitious enough. It wasn't just an insult. It was a fundamental rejection of who I was, or rather, who he perceived me to be. I had always been content, finding joy in small victories, in stability, in the quiet pursuit of my passions. I worked as an administrative assistant, a job that paid the bills and allowed me time for my photography hobby. Mark, on the other hand, was always chasing the next big thing, the next promotion, the next rung on the corporate ladder. I admired his drive, never feeling it diminished my own quiet contentedness, until now. The raw humiliation eventually gave way to a dull ache, and then, slowly, something else ignited. A flicker, a spark. It was barely perceptible at first, buried under layers of grief and self-pity, but it was there. A tiny, defiant voice whispering, "Is that truly who you are, Sarah? Are you not enough?" The question wasn't from Mark. It was from me, to myself, and the answer startlingly was no. I wasn't just what he saw, I was more. My ambition might have been dormant, a seed waiting for the right soil, but it wasn't absent. His cruel words, intended to diminish, had instead struck a match. I stood up, my legs stiff, the apartment suddenly feeling too small, too suffocating. The reflection in the darkened window showed a ghost of myself, eyes swollen, hair disheveled. But beneath the pain, a new resolve began to harden. I wouldn't just prove him wrong. I would. 2 years vanished like smoke, each day a relentless climb. I traded late-night movies for lines of code, weekend brunches for networking events, and casual strolls for power walks to early morning lectures. My small apartment transformed into a war room. Sticky notes plastered across every surface, textbooks stacked like fortifications, the hum of my laptop a constant companion. Sleep became a luxury. Social outings a distant memory. I ate instant noodles, drank lukewarm coffee, and pushed through the burning fatigue in my eyes, all fueled by a singular, unyielding drive. Mark's cruel words, "not ambitious enough," had been a poison that paradoxically cured me, forcing me to confront a dormant strength I hadn't known I possessed. The initial sting of humiliation faded, replaced by a quiet, fierce determination that was no longer about proving him wrong, but about proving myself right. My first breakthrough came 6 months in. I landed an internship at a small tech startup, a place where enthusiasm trumped experience. I showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for every obscure task, and soaked up knowledge like a sponge. I learned to debug code, to articulate complex ideas in pitches, to navigate team dynamics. I discovered a thrill in problem-solving, a deep satisfaction in seeing my ideas translate into tangible results. The internship turned into a junior developer role, and the junior role, through sheer grit, quickly escalated. I moved from coding individual features to leading small projects, then larger ones. My name started appearing on internal memos, then in industry newsletters. I earned a reputation for being meticulous, innovative, and unflappable, even when deadlines loomed like executioners. The company, Nexus Innovations, was growing fast, its reputation for cutting-edge AI solutions attracting top talent and major clients. My rise within its ranks felt organic, driven by an almost insatiable hunger to learn and create. I thrived on the pressure, the constant evolution, the challenge of pushing boundaries. My ambition wasn't a desperate reaction anymore. It was an authentic, pulsating force, propelling me forward. I wasn't chasing Mark's idealized future. I was building my own, brick by painstaking brick. I rarely thought of him, his image fading into a distant, almost irrelevant memory, a catalyst rather than a goal. Then came the email. "Congratulations, Sarah. We'd like you to head the new Quantum Data Solutions department." My heart hammered against my ribs. Head of a department. It felt surreal, a dream I had barely dared to whisper to myself. The new department was a strategic cornerstone for Nexus, focused on integrating quantum computing principles into their existing AI frameworks. It was a massive undertaking, requiring not just technical prowess but strong leadership and the ability to build a high-performing team from scratch. My first major task? Spearhead the hiring process. I dove into it with the same intensity I applied to everything else. I crafted job descriptions, worked with HR to identify key competencies, and personally reviewed hundreds of applications. The sheer volume was staggering. My office, now larger and with a panoramic view of the city skyline, became a fortress of resumes. I sifted through profiles, highlighting relevant experience, flagging promising candidates, discarding those who clearly didn't fit. My focus was razor-sharp, attuned to identifying the perfect blend of technical skill, collaborative spirit, and, yes, genuine ambition. I sought people who didn't just talk about their future but demonstrated a tangible drive to shape it. One evening, as the city lights began to twinkle outside my window, I was deep into a stack of final-round candidates. My eyes scanned a profile. Mark Thompson. My hand paused. Thompson was a common name. Mark, even more so. I brushed it off, a flicker of an old memory, quickly extinguished. It had to be a coincidence. The Mark I knew, the one who had dismissed me with a text, was a different Mark, a different life. I skimmed his credentials. Strong technical background, good recommendations, impressive project list. He seemed like a solid candidate on paper. Ambitious, certainly. I made a mental note to review his portfolio more closely later, then moved on to the next profile, my mind already racing ahead to the interview schedule. The day of the final interviews dawned, crisp and clear. I arrived at the office early, the city still waking up beneath me. I felt a familiar thrill, a nervous energy that always preceded a significant challenge. My team had meticulously prepared the conference rooms, ensuring everything was in order. My assistant, Liam, a sharp young man with an uncanny knack for anticipating my needs, handed me the final interview packets. "All set, Sarah," he said, a cheerful glint in his eye. "The candidates are already in the waiting area. They seem a bit on edge." I smiled, adjusting the collar of my blazer. I felt ready for anything. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh coffee filling my lungs, and walked towards the conference room, completely unaware of the collision course I was on with my past. The future, my future, was about to walk right through that door. The conference room door swung open, a quiet hum of anticipation filling the space beyond. I stepped inside, my posture straight, a confident smile already in place. The room was bright, overlooking the city, and 3 figures sat waiting at the long, polished table. These were the final candidates, the ones who had made it through the rigorous screening process. I felt a surge of professional pride, a quiet satisfaction that came from building something from the ground up, from leading. My gaze swept across the faces, assessing their expressions, their readiness. A young woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, a seasoned professional with a calm demeanor. And then, my eyes snagged on the third man. My breath hitched. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest. He was sitting there, across the table, his posture confident, a slight familiar smirk playing on his lips. Mark, the same Mark who had ended our 2-year relationship with a dismissive text, citing my supposed lack of ambition. His eyes, once so familiar, were now wide with a dawning recognition, the smirk vanishing, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then something akin to horror. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that threatened to drown out the professional calm I usually commanded. But years of pushing past boundaries, of forcing myself into uncomfortable growth, had forged a new kind of resilience. I did not falter. My smile remained, perhaps a fraction tighter but unwavering. I walked to the head of the table, taking my seat with deliberate grace. The other candidates watched, oblivious to the silent, seismic shift that had just occurred. Mark, however, was frozen, his gaze locked on mine, his face pale. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and steady, devoid of any tremor. It was a practiced calm, a shield I had perfected. "I'm Sarah Miller, and I'll be leading today's final interviews. I'm the head of the new Innovations Department." I watched Mark's face as I spoke, his features contorting subtly. The initial shock deepened into a profound realization, the kind that hits you in the gut. He registered the title, the authority, the sheer reversal of our previous dynamic. His eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape, a way to rewind time. He cleared his throat, a nervous, almost imperceptible sound. The young woman next to him shifted in her seat, seemingly unaware, but Mark's discomfort was palpable, a live wire humming between us. "We appreciate you making it this far in the process," I continued, addressing all 3 candidates, but my focus remained subtly, almost imperceptibly, on Mark. "This final stage is designed to delve deeper into your problem-solving skills, your leadership potential, and your long-term vision." I picked up the first resume, deliberately avoiding Mark's. It was the young woman's. I asked her about a complex project she had led, listening intently, nodding occasionally. All the while, I was acutely aware of Mark's presence, his stillness, the way his gaze kept flickering to me then quickly away. He seemed to be shrinking, his once overbearing confidence deflating with every passing minute. When it was his turn, I picked up his resume. His name, Mark Davies, stood out in bold, professional font. I glanced at his photo, a confident, smiling headshot. It was a stark contrast to the man now sitting before me, whose eyes held a desperate, trapped quality. I looked directly at him, my expression unreadable. "Mr. Davies," I began, my voice even, "your resume indicates significant experience in project management. Tell me about a time you faced a major setback in a project, and how you demonstrated your ambition to overcome it." It was a standard interview question, but the word ambition hung in the air, a deliberate echo of his past cruelty. Mark visibly flinched. He started to speak, a practiced answer about a client crisis, but his usual smooth delivery was gone. He stumbled over words, his eyes darting around, avoiding mine. He spoke of re-evaluating goals and pivoting strategies, but his voice lacked conviction. I interjected, "And how did that experience shape your future goals? Did it solidify your understanding of what true ambition entails?" My tone remained professional, inquisitive, yet each word was a carefully placed brick in the wall around him. Mark's jaw tightened. He tried to meet my gaze, but his eyes skittered away again. He mumbled something about learning from mistakes, about striving for excellence. His discomfort was a tangible thing, radiating across the table. He fidgeted with his hands under the table, a nervous habit I remembered all too well. He was no longer the confident man who had walked in. He was a boy caught in a lie. "We value candidates who are adaptable," I pressed on, my voice still calm, "who can adjust their long-term vision when faced with unexpected challenges or revelations. Can you give me an example of a time you had to fundamentally reassess your entire life plan based on a sudden, unforeseen shift?" The question was generic enough to be innocent, but the subtext was a hammer blow. Mark's face paled further. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He swallowed hard. His eyes, wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding, finally locked onto mine. He knew. He knew I was doing this on purpose. He knew I remembered. And in that moment, the power shifted irrevocably, completely. He was no longer the one with control, the one dictating futures. He was the one under scrutiny, the one desperately trying to prove his worth to the person he had discarded. He tried to force a small, conciliatory smile, a ghost of his old charm. "Sarah, I never thought I'd see you here." His voice was low, almost a plea, a desperate attempt to bridge the professional chasm I had so carefully constructed. Mark's eyes, wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror, were fixed on mine. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, only a faint gulp. The air in the room thickened, stretched taut between us. I watched his confident facade crumble. Piece by agonizing piece, and a cold, quiet satisfaction settled in my chest. This wasn't about revenge, not truly, but about the raw, undeniable reality of where we both stood now. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, professional, cutting through the silence. "Mr. Peterson," I began, my tone perfectly even. "We have a limited amount of time for this final round. Shall we continue?" He flinched at the formality, a slight tremor running through his hands where they rested on the table. He cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile. "Yes, of course, Sarah. I mean, Ms. Wells." His voice was hoarse, a stark contrast to the smooth, assured tone he usually adopted. "Please, continue." I picked up his resume, my gaze sweeping over the bullet points detailing his accomplishments. "Your resume highlights a strong focus on strategic growth and future-proofing organizations," I stated, my eyes meeting his. "Can you elaborate on a specific instance where your personal definition of ambition directly led to a project's success, particularly when faced with unforeseen, non-technical obstacles?" His brow furrowed. He stammered, searching for words, a stark departure from his earlier polished responses. "Well, there was the Phoenix Initiative at my previous company," he began, his voice gaining a shaky confidence. "We were looking to pivot into new markets, and I spearheaded the market research, identifying key demographic shifts. My ambition drove me to push through the initial resistance from legacy departments." I nodded slowly, my pen poised over my notepad. "And what non-technical obstacles did you personally navigate in that initiative, Mr. Peterson?" I pressed, my voice unwavering. "Did you encounter any challenges that required you to adapt your strategy not just to market dynamics, but to, perhaps, the human element within the team? For instance, did you ever find yourself dismissing certain team members' contributions because they didn't align with your preconceived notions of future-oriented thinking, only to realize later their value?" His eyes darted, his composure visibly cracking. He shifted in his seat, his gaze flickering to the clock on the wall, then back to my impassive face. I always value diverse perspectives," he insisted, his voice a little too loud. "But sometimes you have to make tough calls. Some people just aren't aligned with the pace, the vision, the ambition required for truly transformative change." He paused, a desperate glint in his eye. "It's about having a clear vision for the future, isn't it, Sarah? A future where everyone is pulling their weight, where there's no room for complacency." The word complacency hung in the air, a direct echo of his past dismissal. I felt a surge of something akin to pity, quickly extinguished by the memory of the cold, impersonal text. "Indeed," I said, my voice flat, giving nothing away. "And in the context of your Phoenix Initiative, were there any instances where you misjudged a situation, perhaps overlooked a crucial detail, because your focus was too narrowly defined by your own vision of the future, rather than the immediate, tangible realities on the ground?" I watched him closely, my question a deliberate probe into his self-serving narrative. He swallowed hard, his face paling. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His gaze dropped to his hands, which were now gripping the edge of the table. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible, stripped of its arrogance. He looked up, his eyes pleading. I never thought. I was wrong, okay? About everything. You were always ambitious, more than I ever gave you credit for. I was a fool." His sudden, desperate apology hung in the air, a raw, unexpected admission. The urge to respond, to unleash years of pent-up hurt, was strong, but I forced it down. This wasn't the time or place for personal vindication. This was a professional setting, and he was a candidate. My ambition now was about building something real, not tearing down the past. I maintained my neutral expression, my gaze steady. "Mr. Peterson," I stated, my voice firm, cutting through his personal appeal, "this interview is about assessing your professional capabilities for the role of senior project manager. Your past personal relationships are irrelevant to this discussion. Let's redirect back to your professional track record." I paused, letting the silence press on him. "You mentioned tough calls and people not aligned with the pace. Can you describe a specific project where your ambition led you to abandon a path or a partnership that, in hindsight, might have offered significant, albeit less glamorous, long-term stability or growth for a more immediate, high-profile, but ultimately less sustainable gain?" He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. The color had drained from his face. He stammered, trying to formulate a response, but the words caught in his throat. He understood. My question, framed in professional terms, was a direct mirror of his past actions, forcing him to confront the superficiality of his own definition of ambition. He had no answer. He had been exposed. The silence that followed my final question stretched, thick and suffocating, between us. Mark sat opposite me, his face a mask of disbelief, his usual confident sheen utterly evaporated. His mouth opened, then closed, no sound escaping, no clever retort forming. His eyes, which had once held such dismissive certainty, now darted around the room, settling on nothing, just lost. He looked like a man who had walked into a mirror maze and found every reflection mocking him. I watched him, impassive, my expression carefully neutral. There was no triumph in my heart, no surge of vengeful glee, only a quiet, profound sense of calm, like a storm finally passing. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about the woman I had become. I leaned forward slightly, breaking the silence with the professional cadence I had mastered over the past 2 years. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Peterson. We appreciate you coming in today. We'll be in touch regarding the next steps in our hiring process." My voice was steady, clear, devoid of any personal inflection. I offered no false hope, no lingering glance, no hint of our shared past. He simply nodded, a slow, jerky motion, his gaze still unfocused. He pushed himself up from the chair, a little too quickly, and stumbled slightly before regaining his balance. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't try to speak again. He just turned and walked out, the soft click of the closing door marking the end of that chapter. I remained seated for a long moment, the hum of the office building around me suddenly more pronounced. My assistant, Maria, entered, her usual cheerful demeanor momentarily subdued as she sensed the lingering tension. She collected Mark's water glass, her eyes briefly meeting mine, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. I stood, stretching my shoulders, a lightness I hadn't realized I was carrying now gone. The interview process continued for the rest of the day. I met with other candidates, each one a blur of qualifications and aspirations, their presentations competent, their answers polished. None of them carried the weight of a painful past, and for that, I was grateful. I focused solely on their skills, their experience, their genuine enthusiasm for the role. Later that evening, the city lights twinkled outside my office window, a vast, complex tapestry mirroring the intricate decisions I had to make. I sat at my desk, the stack of candidate files before me. Mark Peterson's resume lay on top, his qualifications on paper, impressive. He had indeed built a career that, by conventional metrics, spoke of ambition, but his performance today, his inability to adapt under pressure, his flimsy grasp of what true leadership required beyond self-promotion, had revealed a hollowness. He had crumbled under the weight of his own superficial definition of success. I picked up his file, then placed it in the unsuitable pile without a second thought. My decision was clear, unclouded by personal history. The best candidate for the role was Michael Chen, whose innovative approach and collaborative spirit had shown through in his interview. I drafted the offer letter, my fingers flying across the keyboard, a quiet satisfaction settling deep within me. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, the city still waking up around me. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling my new department's empty space. I walked through the rows of desks, visualizing the team that would soon fill them, the projects we would tackle, the innovations we would bring to life. This was my future, forged not from a reaction to a slight, but from a deep, intrinsic drive. Mark's words, "You're just not ambitious enough for my future," had been a catalyst. Yes, but the fire they ignited had long since become my own. My ambition wasn't about chasing external validation or proving someone wrong. It was about building, creating, leading. It was about discovering the boundless capacity within myself, a capacity he had never seen, never understood. I picked up the phone to call Michael Chen, ready to extend the offer. The sun began to stream through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, a metaphor for the countless possibilities now open to me. My past was a distant echo, a story told and concluded. My future stretched before me, clear and bright, defined by my own choices, my own hard-won achievements. I had walked through the fire of dismissal and emerged not scarred, but forged. I was Sarah, head of the department, architect of my own destiny, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, completely free.